I'm assuming you and Tammy have a,
Yeah, but can you
haven't.
flip it up for?
Did you not change the batteries from the last meeting?
Oh, ouch.
Remember, wasn't that a problem?
It worked yesterday, though.
Does this have to go on this one?
Wait a minute now. I still think that we need a clicker here to change the screen when we want. Yeah, that's right.
Oh my
He
gosh.
said he's on his, he said he's on his way.
Who did? He did?
Joe.
I'll have to come in the front door now. Okay, Tammy, what do you have?
Am I?
Okay, he's on his way.
Okay.
You should know me, honey. Go for it. You
Go ahead, Tammy.
I believe Dr. Smith is going to start.
Wonderful. I'm going to go through the first couple of slides and a little bit of background information about our budget priority one, just for one to consider and ponder. Wonder and ponder. What is that? Wonder and consider.
Ponder and consider.
Ponder and consider. The budget that's before you, once again, 93% of that budget is the cost that it takes to employ almost 2,300 people. When we look at our FTEs and our contracted services and all the fixed charges related to all of those things. That's exceptionally important because there's been a really great ongoing conversation within county government about compensation. It started at the same time we were finishing up our negotiated agreement, and as we finished the last year of that negotiated agreement, and that last year included a merit or what we call a step for all of our ESMIC and ESMIC ESPY employees, and a 2% COLA. At that exact same time, the county commissioners were also reflecting upon the employees that fall under their purview. So all of our taxes that come back cover really four groups of people: those who are employed by the Board of Education, SMASA, ESMIC, and ESMIC ESPY, and then under the county umbrella, county employees, correction officers, and sworn officers. Those are their kind of three grouped portions of employees, and they also have people within the state's attorney's office and things such as that. So as we were discussing, and we were able to, through the negotiated agreement, give a step or merit step for all of our ESMIC employees and a 2% COLA. At the same time, the county commissioners were taking a look at what was an appropriate wage for their county employees, and they recognized that they were about 11% below the average for similarly employed people. So they decided on a 3-year plan to phase in an adjustment to their salary. So all the county employees last year got a 3.71 market adjustment, 3.71% market adjustment, and a 1% COLA, as well as a merit step. So they got 4.71% increase in salary plus merit. The correction officers, again, it was a 3-year phase-in because they were about 4 or 5% under market according to the study that they did. So they got a 1% COLA and a 1.5% market adjustment, so a merit plus 2.5% if you look at it. And sworn officers were a little further behind, so they got a 1% COLA and a 1.96 market adjustment, basically a 3% plus a merit. In November, the county commissioners outside of the budget cycle entertained and approved the corrections officers moving to a salary schedule that's aligned to Charles County, the sheriff's department. So they went back and forth, and they heard it, and they moved everybody over. Now that is much higher by percentage than what was originally proposed, but effective January 1, 2020, all correction officers are now on this new scale. The sworn officers requested also to be placed on a new scale commensurate with our neighboring counties or the Maryland State Police. That was not approved in December, and if you'll remember, there were stories in the Enterprise and the reactions of the officers when that came forward and didn't move forward. You know, there was some disappointment. Why is that important to St. Mary's County Public Schools? Because a rising tide lifts all boats. We applaud the county commissioners having a very active conversation with their county employees, their corrections, and their sworn officers to recognize that their pay is lagging behind neighboring counties. Because that's the exact same conversation we've been having for years. And for example, since we're looking at Charles County as an example, we're just going to look at teachers, because teachers is perhaps a little more apples to apples comparison. We could go through and take a look at all of the people in the support professions, but those are different range categories, and it becomes a little bit more challenging. But that is something that we're going through and having a conversation in negotiations, right? If we compare what our teachers make to Calvert and Charles, the county commissioner should be encouraging us to look at Charles as opposed to Calvert, because Calvert is even higher than Charles. But for our teachers that have a bachelor's degree, so starting step one teachers with a bachelor's degree, they would make about just under $2,000 more if they get hired over in Charles. That's a 3.8% increase, 3.8% more money if they start with Charles. If they start over in Calvert, it's over $3,000, and they would make a 6.4% increase in salaries. It's kind of small, so I'm kind of focusing on whatever. If they stay with us for 10 years and they still just have a bachelor's, that then jumps up to a $7,000 difference, or a 12.5% difference. So Calvert, and if we go with Charles, it's even more. It's a 13.9% increase. So if we're comparing our teachers' salaries to our neighbors, we see that we are also in deficit. When we take a look at masters, it becomes just as exaggerated. It's a little bit better the longer that they stay with us. And honestly, the best thing that we can happen is that our employees stay with us for the full 20 years, get all their merit steps, and earn a bachelor's, a master's, and then a doctorate degree, because they will make more money in St. Mary's County than they will in Charles. If they go over to Calvert, though, they'll make substantially more money. I can't talk about what's going on in in negotiations, but I can tell you that the data that's driving those conversations is the same data that drove the conversations last year with the county commissioners for them to consider this phase-in, and more immediately in November when they were talking about their corrections officers, and in December when they were talking about their sworn officers. We all need to be talking about compensation being adequate and at least somewhat competitive with our neighbors. When we look just at teachers' salaries, we see that we have ground to cover. The big picture hasn't changed dramatically in the overall amount since last we spoke 2 weeks ago. The only thing that you will see is that local fund balance has gone up $90,000. No, what's
$94,000.
$94,000.
$54.
Yes, we are at the request of Commissioner O'Connor, who said when they were talking about capital improvement plans that St. Mary's County has a whole bunch of fund balance that should be used for capital projects before we should consider going to the county and asking for their support of capital projects. We did go through and we had $94,000 in our undesignated fund balance, which we then communicated to the commissioners, and we have then taken that undesignated $94,000 and are putting it to a capital improvement project, specifically soil erosion at Chopticon High School. So with this budget, we will not have any undesignated fund balance remaining. Everything that we have will have been either with a healthcare call or something related to emergency snow removal or fuel or things such as that. We will be drawing down our fund balance to the lowest level that it's been since I assumed the role in 2015 when we were in a position where we needed to rebuild it. The other is highlighted, and it's the state funding. So in our original proposed budget, we believed, and we were requesting, that the local request for $113 million would pretty much mirror the state request for $113 million, or state funding for $113 million. We assumed that we were going to see about $3.2 million worth of additional funding from the state based on the fact that we have about 100 more students, 90-something, new students, and there has been an incremental increase over time to recognize that costs escalate, at least incrementally, over time. That's not the case. We received less money. We were quite surprised. But we shouldn't have been, because the state aid provided to a school system is predicated on the wealth of the county, specifically by a thing they call the wealth index. And the wealth index is based on two determining factors: how much your real estate is assessed for, the value of your real estate, and how much taxable income is being generated in your county. And as wealth goes up, state aid goes down. So if the county has accumulated more wealth in property and has accumulated more wealth in income tax, the state is going to give us less money. And we know that that's the case with wealth. In December, when the county had reconciled their books for 2019 and gone through their audited financials and presented, they gave their first look at where they think they're going to be ending up for this year, 2020, and then projecting where they're going to end up ultimately for 2021. If you'll remember last year, they said that they were going to predict a $238.2 million total revenue. Now, at the time, if you'll remember, we went back and forth and we thought that was being pretty conservative based on everything that we were seeing. And indeed, pro forma means how they're actually performing right now. They're about $2.5 million more than they had originally projected for 2020. I would go so far as to say that $240.7 million will be a number that will probably be exceeded when we really get to the end and December 2020 we do a final reconciliation, because the revenue numbers are coming into the county and they are consistently outperforming what they have historically been. That being said, even if you take what we know and you put a modest increase, or 4.6, which is about what the overall, what we grew, they're predicting a $249.2 million revenue pot from which to conduct the business of St. Mary's County. That's $11 million over the 238 that they originally proposed. There's going to be money available. The county is doing well. Revenue is coming in. That is a blessing for the county, without a doubt. But it is a challenge for the school system. For as the county does better and better, the state will provide less and less. And the Kirwan Commission, for all its hopefulness, doesn't change that portion of the formula. The Kirwan Commission is all about layering additional money on top of that to support enhancements to early childhood and special education and transition programming and things such as that. So here we are. Our budget has gone up by $90,000 because we're using our fund balance to partially fund the CIP project at the behest of the commissioner group. The request to the commissioners has gone from $7.5 million recurring to $9.3 $3 million because we are deficit proposed state funding because the county is doing so well. I imagine there'll be a lot of really interesting conversations to be had over the next couple of months. I hope that everybody really does engage in this conversation because it's going to impact 2,300 employees and it's going to impact the funding for 18,000 students, which will impact the lives of 36,000 members of households who are raising children in St. Mary's County. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. McCourt, and you may go through the budget line by line, and we will answer any questions that you may have. And any questions you may have about what I just presented, please feel free.
So before we dive into the expenditure side, are there any questions regarding the revenues?
I do, and perhaps it's a silly one, but so with the decrease in state funding and given maintenance of effort requirements.
So let's be specific. It's not a decrease overall. It's less than we anticipated we believe we're going to get at least $3.2 million worth of new money from the state based on our enrollment increasing by almost 100 children and the historical precedent of about 1.8 to 2% overall funding increases year to year to cover the incremental costs of doing business. That didn't happen. Instead of receiving $3.2 million worth of new money, we only got 1.4.
That's what I thought.
So on the expenditure side, let me just run through at a high level summary. We of course have 13 budget categories as required by MSDE. And with the investment in people being our top priority, we have included 32.6 FTEs under the unrestricted fund and 12.5 restricted FTEs, new personnel, under the restricted fund for a total of 45.1 new positions. We have set aside monies now to support the final negotiated agreements, as well as supporting increases for the bus contractors, as well as technology infrastructure increase. This slide and all the rest of the slides are identical to your prior presentation. They did not incorporate yet the $94,000 increase within the capital outlay category, which will be shown in your final document. So at this time, I ask if you have any questions, we'll go category by category as we've done in the past. So are there any questions from the board for the administration category? There were no significant increases in this category as presented. It reflected an increase of $15,000, and that funding was for negotiations.
So that's for us, that's anything under tabs D. And that's it. Because mid-level is different.
Yeah.
Any questions under tab B in your book? Mary?
No, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Tammy.
Okay, moving on to mid-level administration, there was a requested increase of $812,000. That included funding for negotiations, the new registrars at Lexington Park Elementary School and Carver Elementary School, network security data integrity software, installation of new technology, as well as server maintenance contracts.
Okay. Let's see. Go ahead, Rita.
Okay, do you have anything?
Do not.
Okay, so on page 11 there, I know like the postage, it's the bottom for supplies and materials. Has postage increased, or are we going, because I know that a lot of the correspondence we do via email, so I just kind of question that high number for postage.
The dollar amount that's in there is identical to the current fiscal year.
Right, but I had looked at that too, and when I went through, I was thinking, well, I didn't know if we're still, I know a lot of things have to be duplicated via email, hard copy, and email. But I was just looking at that that's quite a bit for postage. And then there was another one,
before we leave postage, so that's postage school. So that's the amount allocated per school for them to do correspondence back and forth. And a lot of that is, direct mailing for certified mail, things such as that. Keep in mind that we do try to utilize efficiencies as much as we possibly can, but there are times when the only way to ensure that we have reached out to, made contact, and people know exactly what the school is doing is through mailing, hard copy mailing, and certified mailing in particular. For example, we are going to, as we conclude the second marking period, we're going to have seniors that might be in jeopardy of not graduating. We will phone them, we will email them, we will text message them, we will send them home with stuff, but then we will also send them certified mail so that we can then indeed document that we inform them ahead of time with more than enough time to make up what they need to so that they can graduate. And that's how we get to a 94% graduation
Well,
rate.
plus I think at the elementary, or like the sixth graders, they didn't necessarily, not every middle school sent out the schedules
Yes.
before open house.
Oh, okay.
So, and we had upgraded Hack over the summer, so it was not readily accessible to print. So I think that might be something that's also rethought.
Right,
Okay,
Refine
I just wanted
Yeah.
clarification
Yeah.
on that. I
Guys'
appreciate
departments
that.
were very busy on open house day. I just have one question on there. The George Washington Carver, the AP position that was from 12 to 11 months.
That was a decrease. The person left
Uh-huh.
was a 12-month assistant principal
That
because
had
they
moved
had
from
been.
somewhere else.
Yeah, well, it had moved from
Yeah.
someplace else within the system.
Yep.
And when the position was refilled, it was refilled with an 11-month
Okay.
AP.
Okay.
The registrars, the new registrars at Lexington Park and George Washington Carver, how is a registrar different than an administrative assistant or a secretary? And why are those two positions needed?
So the registrar is the keeper of all records relative to with pupil enrollment and performance overall. They're the ones that then verify the counts so that we make sure that we have all of our FTEs correctly so that we can get state level funding. And both of the title schools in particular, that's one of our highest mobility areas. So we have a lot of people moving in and out and coming into, so they really do need to have a dedicated person who's absolutely their entire job is just making sure that all the registration materials are there, that everything's being accounted for correctly, and that we're ready for any kind of state audits that may come.
Thank you.
I do have one more question if y'all are done. On page 27, the projector board, smart board, projector repairs, replacement parts. Okay, is this for all the different schools throughout the county, or?
Yes, it is.
Is that the 130,000?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. Are they, well, how old are the smart boards now?
The smart board, some of them are 9, 10 years.
Reaching end of life.
Then the other thing too is not all the schools are using them, like, I guess, making good use of them. And are the smart boards the ones that they do the IEP on, or no?
It depends on how the school is locating. So if they have one in like a conference room and they're going through, they may use a smart board, or they may also just use a projection device, or they might just be doing it on their laptops. What we are encouraging and working with, and I believe you've had a conference and a conversation with Mr. Serbiak about, is the goal is to have as standard that whenever you go into a conference room and you're going through the IEP process, as you're actually going through the IEP process, the administrator or IEP facilitator has pulled up the actual online IEP on
And are they
a
using
smart board.
on these smart boards? Okay, I got a call on the way here from another parent with an IEP, did not use the smart board at Leonardtown Middle School. So once again, I will be talking to you after this with the parent's name. I guess I'm kind of like getting a little irritated at this point.
Right.
Because Mr. Zerbig, you have always, every time that I've called you on an issue, you have taken care of it immediately, and I thank you so much for it. But if they're not going to use the equipment, then why are we paying for it?
Right. The purpose of the equipment being there is that we have best practice, and we need to make sure that everybody's doing
If I
best
could
practice.
it's never been a policy that we use it, however, I feel it's best practice to use it, and then we have had that meeting with IEP chairs, so moving forward.
Well,
we
they
are gonna be
forgot,
having-
since 19 days ago,
I
they
know.
forgot.
I hear you, but moving forward, we are going to be discussing that and making sure that that is part of our policy.
Okay, yeah,
It's
I
a
just wanna
huge-
make
it's a
sure that
huge
we are
ship. The rudder has
using.
to turn slowly sometime.
No, I just wanna make sure that what we have, we are using.
Right.
I don't wanna be paying for
Yes.
replacement bulbs and replacement parts, and the people that are supposed to be using it are not using it, so.
Yes.
Smart boards, when they're not working for most of the classrooms, it's usually a priority, and I'm trying to find a quick way to keep the room working, either with a portable device or looking at inventories that we may have to keep it going until a new product arrives. So that is often something that they will reach out to me for assistance in trying to get it up and running at most locations.
So just a real quick, while you're sitting there, since they're getting older, are the replacement parts harder to find?
Some of the projectors that fail, we're not replacing. The original smart projectors are the UF55s or some of the original ones. Repair cost is not, doesn't make sense to repair
Okay.
those. So when they break, they're just we're just disposing of those. We're looking at the new interactive panels now. They have a 9 to 10 year life expectancy, and there's really no maintenance for us. So that's the model we're moving towards. So we're not really installing new projectors or smart
Okay.
boards, but we still have to maintain our supplies for the projectors we have out there.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions in the mid-level administration category?
I don't think so.
Moving on to instructional salaries and wages. There's an increase of $3 million here, funding for negotiations, a substitute pay increase proposed, evening high school is included, after-school programs, as well as the equity EPEB supplemental pay, the transition of the Baby Talk paraeducator to the unrestricted fund, an increase of 1 charter school teacher, an increase of a 0.1 ABAPA art teacher, and an increase of 0.5 PE teacher, as well as 4 grant-funded positions for the early childhood pre-K Kerwin funded.
Why are we transitioning a Baby Talk paraeducator to the unrestricted fund?
We transitioned the rest of them this current year. We had 1 remaining to utilize the remaining funds that were within the Baby Talk program, but there's no additional funding available to support it going forward.
Okay.
Do you have anything? So, under the teacher IRT, 11-month, 12-month ELMS IRT, there's a,
I'm sorry, what page category?
oh, I'm sorry, page 20, under instructional salaries, and it's the elementary schools, and it's halfway down,
Page 29. What's
29,
your
sorry.
expenditure number on the left?
7132.
Okay, gotcha.
So, I saw that there was a large decrease, but yet on the,
It actually wasn't a decrease, it was a reallocation to correctly reflect the monies in the correct categories, account structures. So
Okay.
overall, within the category, it's still the same dollar amount.
okay,
It was a correction.
okay.
Any other questions in this category? Moving on to textbooks and instructional supplies, reflecting an increase of $566,000. Some of the highlights are the continuation of the school-based technology refresh, the network core and transfer receivers, and the firewall replacement.
Yeah, I'm still learning how to do all this.
We're tab E.
So, page 47. Is it 47? I'm sorry, I'm still getting used to my contacts. So, there's it. 49, so that would be 48. So, when the career and technology supplies, which for everybody,
7385, Tammy. The category number.
so,
I'm sorry, what page number?
It's
48.
page 48.
7385.
And then, okay, so I'm looking at that, and then I flip the page to page 50, and the career and technology, 73, what is it, 85 again. So there's two different categories with the career and technology supplies with money. So one is what, 166, 500, and then the next page, you flip the page over, and it's 51, 572.
It's in two different,
Yes.
it's two different
So
account
if you look at
structures.
the bottom of
Right.
page 48, you'll see that that's for all schools. So each one of the high schools receives their own allocation for CTE support. And then there's also CTE money on page 50 that is actually allocated to the Department of Instruction that they use globally to support the program.
What, you mean for each of the high schools?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other additional questions in this category?
I do. On page 55, all of the computer software. 7355.
Yes.
So I'm assuming the overall amount has dropped from fiscal year 2019 to 2021, just because I'm assuming that we had implemented some of these programs, so we had the initial setup, whatever. And I'm curious to know whether we're keeping everything at the same level, and the reason for the drop is just because we don't have that setup anymore, or are we actually decreasing our seat licenses on any of these programs? Because the way I'm reading these, most of these are things I know, like my kids use at school. So I was, and I know Dr. Jaffers has all of his statistics. So,
I think part of it is we look always, every year we look at usage, and sometimes the usage doesn't justify the cost.
okay,
We also have the new textbook adoption, specifically from social studies, and fortunately, some of the resources are embedded in that adoption. So we're looking at bundling a couple of different resources together
okay.
to still have access. We are losing discovery education. That's one of the big, I think it was a $50,000 or $60,000 price point that we are eradicating. And we actually can find a lot of those same videos online via YouTube, et cetera. So,
Right.
so we're actually putting the word out, hey, save to your hard drive right now the videos that you use right now to support. But again, it's a combination of lack of use, justifiable cost, and embedded some of these resources into new textbook adoption, specifically social studies.
Okay. Okay.
And you actually saved $20,000.
Yes.
Yes, he did.
Thank you.
Well, $40,000 if you look at both those categories.
That's a new teacher.
Well, at least a pair.
Yeah, it's gonna stay.
Yeah, not fully loaded, just salary.
Right.
Okay, anyone have anything else on tab E?
Okay, the other instructional cost category, there was an overall increase of $45,000. That includes the after-school contracted temp services, the CSM dual enrollment, athletic trainers increase in hours, and increased facility rental for swim. Okay. Any questions?
No, but I'm pleased that you're working to, or at least trying to, again, increase the number of hours for the athletic trainers.
Same thing,
Um,
right?
I hope we can keep that in the budget. I know that that has been something we have,
In and out, right.
Yeah.
Right.
The next category is special education. There was a requested increase of $776,000, which includes funding for negotiations, 5 new special education teachers, 5 new special education paraeducators, a new special education social worker, behavioral mental health professional, and 1 new secretary for the special education department, as well as 4 special education grant-funded positions, and that would be under the Kerwin funding.
I have a question on the, I'm not, whoever's here from ESNIC, I'm not implying that our special education teachers are not overworked or we do not need more, but I am curious as to do we have an increase in our special education population or the number of people who are now under IEP plans year over year? Or, I mean, is it trending upward, or is it a combination of the upward trends and the additional documentation and responsibilities that are being required?
Yes, so our caseloads
Yes
per,
to all?
so our caseloads per our staffing plan are, they meet our staffing plan.
Okay.
However, what we're finding is we are getting a lot of students coming in with additional service needs, a lot for our regional programs. So really the responsibilities of special education, as you know, it's not just paperwork and caseload. They have to be, we're looking at the universal design for learning approach now. We're looking at universal screening or pre-K to 2 now. It's that co-teaching. We're going to a more inclusive setting. It's a lot of responsibility on our special education staff. A new regulation as well from MSDE now is that we are not to have any students working towards a alternative education at K to 2. So we have to look at programming for those kids now, and really we're finding a lot of behavior at the K to 2 level, and we have to look at supporting those students as well. So case management wise, our numbers look good, but responsibilities, service hours, and the intensive needs, we need additional staff.
Okay, so in layman's terms, for me, same number of children, but yet the services that the children we have within special education, the amount of services that we are providing within an IEP plan are increasing.
Correct.
So even though it might be one child, rather than having like maybe, and I know I'm really dumbing it down, like maybe only 4, items that they need, maybe they need 6 or 7 or 8.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
for example, you might see a special education teacher with 8 students on their caseload. However, those students might have 3-4 hours of services a day.
Okay,
So,
whereas in years past, it might have been
Correct.
much lower.
Correct.
Okay. All right, anyone else? That's good, I always,
Next category is student personnel services. There's a requested increase of $169,000. The highlights include funding for negotiations, 1 new PPW, and 1 records mentor floating secretary. And of course, we mentioned at the last meeting that there is a move of the mental health coordinator to student health services per MSD's request.
Okay, on page 80, and it is, the computer software is 7355. The Naviance.
Yes.
Okay, so I know we had a meeting, on one of our meetings not too long ago, and we asked for more information, basically, like, how it's being used, how the word's being gotten out there, how often it's being used, a little bit more back. And I would like to see that before we are continuing to fund Naviance. Make sure that is being used as it should be. Make sure our money is well spent.
So I have Mrs. Long, the director of Student Services, and she oversees the counseling department, what ultimately is coordinating the implementation of Naviance 6 through 12.
They are. So they had parent presentations at all the schools for Naviance. Most recently this year, we're implementing the parent portal. So that was important. We sent emails through the Naviance platform to all parents at the high school level, and then just recently, yesterday and as well as today, sent another email out to those parents that have not accessed Naviance yet.
would be me, I did get my.
Okay, I was gonna say, is there another way besides
I'll
sending
admit
it out through that, I guess, the Naviance portal, to sending it out through, I guess, how, what is that jar or whatever?
Beach jar.
When you're sending something out, to say to parents, don't forget that you need to be working with your child on this, or have your child, another way other than just going through that Naviance itself.
Right. Yes, and our principals in their messages out to their families also include that in their newsletters and.
So one of the things we did a broad push out to everybody, and I saw the first email and signed up. And once you're signed up,
My daughter signed up.
it continues, and so did my son through school. It continues to send out messages as you go through and say, hey, check this out. So once you're in that loop, it continues that whole loop. we've done a second push after our conversation as well to get that out and to send it out. And so at this point, as we go into February, it'll be incumbent on the schools then to go through and see which parents haven't set up an account, because then those could be individually contacted through counselors and
We can
scales.
keep going back to
Yes.
that
I
list
mean,
of parents that haven't
yes.
I mean,
contacted.
it's probably good that you push it, because all the PSAT scores were released.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
and we were bombarded with those, but at the same time, you could hit us at the same time with the Naviance thing.
It turns out that getting the word out to about 8,000 homes is, the first push out, you might get 4,000, and then, you kind of work your way through. But I will tell you that certainly following the conversations that we had in December and January, we've seen a lot more activity within the schools. I ran into all the middle school counselors who were here Monday as they were going through a specific session just for Naviance rolling out in the middle school and what it looks like. So.
And as our students continue to use it, there are lessons at each grade level that students are accessing, and then the Slack students did their Be Your Best You video for Naviance as well. So, we want all that chatter going on with the students as well, using it, and then again, seeing those
I will
parents.
have to, I haven't seen anything from a middle school level, though.
But I want to hear what
So,
Nagina.
so we did have a presentation presented by Mr. Wolcott at one of our high school Slack meetings, and he kind of went through about the usefulness of Naviance, what you can do, how to work it, and I'm actually working with him at the moment to have a Naviance orientation. I don't know if you would call it that, but like a night.
Sure.
So parents, students, whoever can just come, and we're working on getting parents to know more about it through that. So yes, on the middle school side of it though, Slack hasn't done, but
Yeah, it was,
Thanks for doing that.
the middle school
Good idea.
counselors just came in for their training on it, actually, so we're just rolling that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when we do Rising Freshman Information Evenings, incorporated in that will be things that you need to know to include Naviance. And I mean, we're give us a little bit of time in the middle school. We definitely are
Oh,
working on it and rolling it out.
Well, and I hope when the middle schools have their evening orientation or whatever for fifth grade
Fifth
students
grade, rising to
transitioning
sixth,
to
yep.
sixth grade, prime time to start that conversation. But with the amount of information that's provided to parents and students on those, during those times, I would think similarly, it's gonna take multiple hits to make sure that people are.
In all honesty, when you do that, you should include it when the schedules go home for the parents to sign. I mean, because every parent looks and signs at the schedule.
Right.
So it's a perfect marketing
To have it
opportunity.
right in there.
And then same thing at the high school level to push out the fact that the SATs are free.
Right.
The Khan Academy, because those are like, your schedule document is probably the one piece of paper that actually does touch a parent's hand, because they
Because
have to sign it and send it back.
That'd be great.
So,
PSAT and SAT we provide. for.
right. Because there's a lot of people that just, they don't know that they don't listen to our board meetings, they don't read the newspaper, so they just don't know.
We should be #1 on YouTube.
We are in the
Yeah, trending.
What we need to do is we need to have someone troll, so like when Scott doesn't close school and everyone's complaining on Facebook or Instagram
Hey, did you
about,
check?
right, then we'll be like, hey, do you know we do
You know, in
SATs for
Naviance
free?
right now,
Hey,
you can
are
be-
you on Naviance? That's what we
Hop
need.
on a phone call
We need social media trolls.
We are in the business of education, and we recognize that we have to see people where they are and help them get to where we want them to be, and that includes our parents and guardians.
Education.
And I just want to say too that we had 2,196 college applications completed through Naviance.
Wow.
Oh, that's good.
Just this past, so that's, yeah.
For this
And we
graduating senior class.
we have
The class of 2020.
we have 1,200 current sitting, 12 or 1,300 current sitting seniors. So it's a pretty impressive number.
Thank you.
Okay.
I will tell you, I was going through the Maryland Longitudinal Data System data for St. Mary's County, and the more you dive into that data, just the better we are. I mean, the things that, when you see how many of our kids are concurrently enrolled and earning credit and how it compares to other counties, there's a lot of really good stuff going on in St. Mary's County. Okay.
The next category is the student health services. There is an increase of requested $137,000, which includes funding for negotiations as well as a new registered nurse. Any
Is that to
questions?
replace an LPN, or is that for additional
Additional.
needed?
It's an additional nurse, and I was told that would probably go to Evergreen Elementary
Yeah,
School.
Evergreen and middle schools too, both,
Yeah.
you know, we'll assess that again at the end of the school year, but that's where our needs are.
Any additional questions? The next category is student transportation. There's a requested increase of $1.5 million, which includes funding for negotiations, a new coordinator 3 position, after-school program, contractor bus route fee increase, as well as the hourly contracted driver attendant rate increase, mileage increase for the buses, and finally, the installation of Synovia on the remaining buses. Are there any questions?
Mr. Thompson, you might as well come right out. Just start making your way to the podium.
I have a couple. Number one, I would just like to reiterate that the increases that are included in here for the hourly pay rates for the bus drivers and the attendants, is what we are paying the contractors. What the contractors pay their own drivers and their own employees is beyond our purview. So
That's
just,
correct.
so everyone, there seems to be an incredible amount of confusion about that. And then I had 2 questions, well, one was my point about the pay increases, so thank you. And then on the overtime,
What page?
page 88, there's more FTEs on out-of-county routes, the 601 and 602 combined. So we increased, are we transporting, is that just, once again, a function of more students that we're having to send out-of-county placements, or greater distances? Are we sending more people up to Hopkins than what we had before,
There's
or a combination
a
of a
little
bunch
bit
of
of
stuff?
that combination,
Okay.
but it's primarily because we were primarily using hourly drivers listed under the substitute category,
Okay,
and also Abacus substitute attendants, bus attendants
okay,
on those buses. So we've been trying to make an effort to get, they all need to be FTEs. So we're
Gotcha.
pretty much there that they're all FTEs that are on those buses. And so then that affects the overtime category. So we've tried to reduce, if you look
Okay.
at the Abacus, our temp agency payment line and our substitute payment line, we reduce those.
right. And
As the overtime went up.
I didn't pick up on that, but I did see that
Yes.
Right,
increase.
so it's our employees, our drivers, our attendants, our buses
Yes.
for out-of-county placements.
Anyone else? Any questions? Great. Jeff, you're done.
Wow.
Quick,
Wow.
leave quickly.
The next category is the operation and plant, and there's a requested increase here of $1.5 million to include funding for negotiations, a new information technology project coordinator, I apologize, 2 new ones, one of which will be offset by a reduction of 1 information technology specialist, an increase of a computer support specialist. Part of that would be funded out of unrestricted funds, and the other half would be funded via our grant funds. 10 new safety and security assistants, replacement vehicles, utility increases, vendor managed inventory increase, as well as the security system software hardware maintenance increases. Are there any questions?
I have a question. For the safety and security assistance, that is the deployment into
Elementary
the
schools.
elementary schools.
Right.
Okay.
So the intention is, we have done the complete security vestibules at the high schools. We are working on the security vestibules in the middle schools and are very close in each one of the sites, if not completed each one of the sites. We will then begin and transition into the elementary schools. And so as an elementary school, so we would hire safety assistants for the elementary schools, because as they are completed, the security vestibules are set up such that sitting on the other side of that glass would be a security assistant who would be checking people in and out, monitoring all of the security software that's incorporated within the building, and then providing an additional resource and support for the school itself.
Okay, and then I have, so on our safety and security and the assistants, do they have, I mean, they all work a straight regular workday schedule.
Regular workday,
Yes.
So if they are there for after-school activities or anything, I don't think we employ them for any of that. Or do they get overtime, or how?
Well, it depends on the hour count for the week, but they would be eligible for overtime pay if they are employed in that position and that working afterwards.
I am aware of two, I believe, that are working evening high school, so they get paid at an overtime straight time
Okay.
rate because they are not exceeding the 40 hours a week.
Okay.
And that'd be one of the, and that's.
I'm just asking because in light of other events, we have individuals who are taking tickets and things at different events that I assume are teachers that are volunteering. I don't even know who they all are, but as through our school safety meetings at the state level, we continue to have the conversation of the concern of safety and security after the school day.
Right.
So I don't know if that would deter anyone if they would see someone that they see during the school day sitting there, along with them or whatever at the same time. I don't think we've ever considered that.
That is a conversation to be had, and that's a really expensive conversation to be had. And it's also a conversation to be had with the sheriff themselves, because the sheriffs do provide officers for events, and we pay them an hourly rate that we've negotiated with the sheriff's office. But it becomes a question of whether or not they actually have people to be able to do all these events, because of course, as you've heard from the sheriff, they're having a challenge filling all their positions. So
And he's paying a lot of them overtime.
they're already making
yeah,
they're already making
so-
overtime to do
yeah.
the job that
Right,
they're
yeah.
doing themselves.
So
So just
they're-
how many hours can a person work within a week?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to the maintenance category, there's a requested increase of $161,000, funding for negotiations, contracted services increases for HVAC replacement, sewage pump replacement, interior and exterior painting, as well as the Leonardson High School gym floor refinishing. Any questions?
Nope, not for me.
Next category is fixed charges. There's a requested increase of $3.6 million for the Social Security associated with negotiations, pension increase, health insurance. We have not received that estimate. That's expected to receive in late February, early March, but we've estimated a 5% increase. General liability and workers' compensation insurance, as well as $1 million set aside for OPEB. Any questions? And the final category is capital outlay. The original budget as presented was a decrease of $65,000. However, we will be adding that $94,000 we previously discussed. This includes funding for negotiations, as well as a 0.5 secretary increase for the fiscal specialist position, and an offset of a net decrease in building modifications. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I will just say that the idea of utilizing the last of the undesignated fund balance, it makes me really uncomfortable. I know it came at the request of one commissioner, but when you consider what their undesignated fund balance is and ours is, I just want people to understand that if we have an emergent need, having totally decimated that undesignated fund balance, we will likely be forced to go to the commissioners to request assistance. So I don't want that to get lost in all of the conversation. So
I have to agree with Kathy.
And the only counter I'd have to that was it was $94,000. So
I
that's
understand, but it's just
yeah.
the
I mean,
idea
it's not
of.
It's not $30 million.
When I have reservations about budget, I express it, whether it goes anywhere or not. It is what it is. But I've expressed my concern with past moves. That what will we do if? And so I just wanted to get it out there. And I do need to go back to something, if you don't mind. page 99, under operation of plant. The custodial supplies, 7306. You've included just over $22,000 in order to accommodate House Bill 133 for
Yes.
feminine hygiene products and dispensers. Please be aware that there is another bill moving its way through, and that is House Bill 2008. 208. Sorry,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
yeah, I know.
They were really
They
busy.
will get there.
Yeah.
There will be a House Bill 2000 something.
Yeah, probably. They are looking to require that we provide those dispensers and products in every one of our schools.
Yes, we, unfortunately, we didn't get that until after these documents were printed, but Mr. Varner's already responded to the fiscal note on that.
Okay, thank
To
you.
There we go, that's where your
Department of
$94,000 go.
Well, when you look at, Anna I believe it was Anna Rundle said that when they looked into this, this was gonna be over $100,000 in their budget, so, just
Right,
saying.
and that absolutely is a teacher,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, so, I know that they have more schools than we do, it won't come to that for
Or
us,
computer technician, or, you know, that's.
but at the same time, just, cause it has to be in every single bathroom in every single school.
Okay.
So, anyway, thanks.
So, if there are no more questions,
Well, I think we kind of need to decide what we want to do. Tammy, can you go back to the slide that shows where we lost our state money that we thought we were going to get?
Mhm.
So, when this was initially presented 2 weeks ago, the request of the county commissioners was 7 and change,
Mhm.
and now it's 9 and change.
Yeah.
So, as a board, and during part of this work session, I think we need to have the discussion of whether we take the budget forward requesting the $9 million, or whether we look at items that need to be cut in order to get back to our original 7, or another number. And I'm just throwing it out there, because it's, it's up to us to, we had a plan, and now, based on what the funding has come in, it's changed, and I'm not saying it might not change again, but it's, at least to have the discussion of whether to just keep rolling with, roll it all forward, or do you wanna take a look at some of the items that are contained in the budget, and just, for those of you who don't have the benefit of the book, most of the line items are, they've gone over the big ones. It's, it's your special education, it's your safety and security, and it's the negotiated agreement.
Right. And
So-
fixed charges.
And fixed charges,
Fixed
which,
charges, yeah.
health insurance,
And
which we really
transportation.
can't get around, right, and transportation, so, those are the big 5 items that would give us close to that amount of money that we are not gonna receive from the state.
At this point in time, given that the Kerwin bill, or the blueprint for Maryland's future, is supposed to drop next week, and they're talking about between 200 and 300 plus pages of the bill.
Right.
I think there are so many unknowns at this point that, for me, to try to make adjustments now, or determine a laundry list of, what would we change if we, to get back to this
Right,
number, I think it becomes too confusing.
I'm just saying,
to
I think in order to be responsible, I think we have to have the discussion of whether or not to look at the budget, again, based on the funding that we are not going to receive from the state. That's my only point,
I
is
got it.
to have that open discussion as to what we as a board wanna do with going forward. Because this is the work session, so this is where it
Right.
would all be, considered, or think about it, and then before we, take the final
Lunch.
budget over.
And I will tell you, so just because I can hear the commissioner's voice in the back of my head, maintenance of effort only requires them to provide about $600,000 worth of new money. the original budget was requesting another $7 million on top of that. And if I look at the historical precedent, it wouldn't leave me hopeful that we would have that kind of an opportunity with them. We are now at 9.4, so we're gonna be about 8.6 of brand-new funding over maintenance of effort. That would be the largest amount ever provided St. Mary's County Public Schools in the history of St. Mary's County Public Schools.
At this time, I would think that we need to hear public comment during our budget public hearing before we do any cutting. Right now, this is what the superintendent has to do by law. He's mandated to put forth the needs of the system. This is the board's first step in looking at it. We can think about it, but we need to hear from the public as well. We need to see if any additional money is coming in. We have to see what Kerwin will do, and then we can move forward. But right now, I'm not ready to say what we need to cut. Everything in here is really what we need, and that's what the superintendent puts forward. Because we definitely need the safety and security initiatives. We need special education, definitely. We need registrars for the schools, the 2 Title I schools, to meet the requirements of the law when it deals with audits, the number of students, because it is a transient population. We don't want to get in trouble about that. So we need the extra help there, because the turnover at those schools is significant. So I appreciate your suggestion, and it is something for the board to start thinking about, because we never get what we want. I mean, but we have to put forward the needs of the system. So it's something we can think about in the back of our heads, but we need to hear from the citizens as well under public comment.
Well, I mean, it's also a check against the superintendent and the administration to make sure that what they have presented to us over the past year and what the needs are here, that we're in lockstep with. And that's the check that we need right now.
Right.
So not,
I mean, it would
in
come-
order to, just as if, what Mr. Serviak said, I mean, he's been telling us for years, that this is how our special education needs are going, this is how it is. So as long as everyone is comfortable on this board with what have been, what the presentations have been to us over the past year, or 2 or 3, and then that this budget matches that, then that's fine. But that's the check that we need right now from everyone on here.
Right, because in order to come up with the kind of delta that we're facing, it's really going to come down to the additional positions.
Correct.
That's the only way we're going to be able to accommodate this. And so
I think, with everyone knowing that the negotiated agreement was expiring this year, I would have hoped that we would have been a little bit farther along, but apparently there was a lot of back and forth as to when to start negotiations. So, it is, we are where we are right now in that stage of that game. So,
whatever happens with that will have a significant impact potentially on any additional positions that we would be able to accommodate.
And we have to honor that agreement too, as well.
well, right now we don't have one.
Right.
I know,
We do not have
when
one for
we
the
get
upcoming
it,
year.
we need to honor it. I know we don't have it yet, but
We need to
they're
negotiate
working on
something we
it
can fund.
diligently. So whatever we negotiate, we
I
need
just
to
kind
be
of need
able
a
to
gut
fund
check
it.
from everyone up here
Right.
that what is in here is, because you hear all this other, skirmer around the state is like, this county's doing this and this one's doing this, and, not everyone's in lockstep, and I do not need that down, we do not need that down here, so.
Right.
So the question is, do we support the superintendent's recommended budget? Is that the question that we're asking here?
Based on your seat at this table over the past 12 to 14 months, that we've heard all these presentations and everything, from public comment during the meetings to, what we've voted on and discussed here, yes.
If we have been serious about the safety and security vestibules that will be manned. And in order to do that, that's going to take the 10 additional plus safety and security assistants.
And
We
have to
definitely
give-
need the special ed teachers, because otherwise we're gonna be out of compliance.
Right.
And that could bring, well, the students not doing well, but also lawsuits.
And we need parents to be reassured that their children are as safe as they can be within our school system, that we're doing everything in our power to keep students, staff, and community safe. So I support the superintendent's budget, but this is just the first step.
Right.
We have many
right,
steps to
completely
go,
understood, yes.
but I think he's done his job. He's done his job well. I think staff members have answered our questions. There's no waste. I mean, everything in there, as always, is what we need. So,
Yeah, there's not-
so this is just the first step.
Okay.
And we got
Just
a
as long
ways to go.
Just as long as we had
So
a,
we'll
as
see.
long as we had
Then when
a
we have
pulse
to,
check.
when we get to the hard decisions, then we will make them as a board.
I completely
But
agree.
right now,
So our next time that we're actually looking at a work session is February 19th. So we'll have the input from the public. Maybe
Yes.
by then, we'll have better information.
We'll have hopefully
from what we're
Kerwin
doing
and
with
wherever we are with the
statewide.
state.
right,
We'll have all the information from DLS relative to revenue from across the state and per pupil rankings and things that just kind of help
Yeah.
us inform. And the county commissioners, for their part, will have held at least one budget work session
not two.
by then, if not two. Now, they don't look at us first, obviously, because they have to wait for us to conclude our work, but that'll give us a really good idea of what they're talking about and what their anticipated new expenses are going to be for 2021.
and we do what we do each budget cycle. We make the best decisions that we can make. No one will get everything they want, but we are sitting at this table to make those hard decisions with input from citizens and everyone, all the stakeholders. And all the funding Kathy mentioned, Rita mentioned about special ed and what we need to be in compliance with the law, and we have to be in compliance with the law.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And like I said, rising tide lifts all boats. The county has been really actively engaged in making salaries right for their county employees and sworn officers and corrections officers, and talking about the cost of that. So they're grappling with what it costs to make sure you have a comparable salary structure. And that's really the underpinning part of this as well. While there are component pieces that ride along top of it that probably accumulate to about $2 million, all the things that you've talked about, the big driver behind it is employee salary cost. And if you don't pay attention to having a competitive wage, then there are cascading effects from that, such as not being able to retain people, not being able to hire people, having really fantastic staff leaving our employment and traveling across the bridge or up the road. And it's the exact same argument that we heard from all of the other groups. We echo and we support all of it being in lockstep.
How many employees do we have at the top of their salary scale? So, and what I mean by that is, so then if we don't provide a COLA, we only provide a step, then they're stagnant for another year.
It's over across the teaching scale. The teachers, I think it's about a little over 10%. It's like 160, maybe a little less than 10%, 160, 170. But yeah, there's a graphic that we lay that out that shows
Okay.
where everybody is on all the steps. And certainly within negotiations, that's one of the conversations that people have, is that, these extremely, these employees who've been with us and really have demonstrated, their commitment to our kids in our county, they hit the top of the scale, and without a COLA, they don't get anything more.
Well, that's my point, because I mean, as you go through the commissioners' work sessions, they just keep throwing out step, 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 and I think it's lost that not everyone always gets a step.
Right.
And that's never part of the whole conversation. So for those 160 or 200 people or whatever we have,
Just within the teaching ranks,
that
there's
don't-
also
that,
ESPY.
that there is a step, but they still And if you figure if you start teaching here at 22, 20 years, it puts you in your mid-40s, so you're in the middle of high school, college, you know, it's tough to just have a steady salary and have your expenses still go up, but not, you know,
It's demoralizing.
correct,
It is absolutely demoralizing.
so.
But that's also one of the reasons why we strongly encourage moving across the scale as well as up the scale. So as you go up, you have your bachelor's, then you get your APC, and then you get your master's, and then you get your master's plus 15, and that moves you over, and your master's plus 30, and that moves you over, and then your master's plus 60. And once you get to your master's plus 60, you might as well get your doctorate. So then everybody has to call you Dr.
Well, if you're
Smith.
plus 15, plus 30, and plus 60, it's still costing you money.
Yeah, well, it's actually not, because you provide the benefit to have people take all the coursework. So literally, if you
100%.
just take full advantage every single year of the $3,000 that we afford teachers and the amount, you know, we actually pay for that. We're paying for them to get a raise.
100%.
It's pretty, well,
Well,
so.
what
No,
percentage?
costs has gone up, especially.
It
Right.
depends on the cost of the
So
tuition.
I believe $3,000, you can net 6 credits at CSM. I think that's about that. I don't know. Maybe I can be spot checked on that. But you can move across the scale and have it be offset by what we provide.
Yeah, well, when I was doing my master's, $3,000 would get me half a class.
Mhm.
More competitive agreements. now.
Well, the quality of the school system is determined by the quality of the teacher in the classroom.
And all those who
And-
support them, yes.
And paying them, being able to recruit, retain those teachers, we have to pay them a respectful salary. And the figures and the research that the superintendent did proves that we are not on par with the Tri-County area, that we need to do better. And people choose a county to live in based on the quality of the schools. The future is in the classroom,
Yes.
and that's what they are looking at. The quality of the school. That's in the top 3 of what people are looking for when they move to an area. We have excellent schools, but we want to keep them that way. And we want to pay our teachers enough so that they can afford to live in the county.
And all of our support staff as well.
Yeah, everybody.
They're all negotiated under one unit, so what raises, again, rising tide, all boats.
Okay.
Sorry,
That can be your new quote.
We're not gonna get into quotes. Although I did win $5.
I know.
You did?
All right, anyone have anything else? Okay, then we are done. We'll be back at 5 o'clock.
Thank you.